This was my very first mouse, and it was the most popular back then that you could buy in my home country, Philippines. This A4 Tech mouse comes along with a keyboard, and it is dirt cheap, but don't let its price deceive you because it's one heck of a package. It is considered legendary for its iconic design that accommodates a lot of users. Therefore, even to this day, the A4 Tech combo is still a staple in a lot of establishments here. I know it's not meant for gaming, but you'll see this mouse and keyboard in a lot of PC cafes back then, or what we call here computer shops. I know that sounds weird because they are not selling computers, but it's a shop with computers that you can pay to use. Therefore, with some language barriers and broken English, the term computer shop was born. But going back to the A4 Tech mouse, it was an icon, and for me, this was the mouse I have used for the longest. Ever since I first discovered what computers are back in 2010, if I'm remembering correctly, this was the mouse I used to play games on Y8, and back when Facebook still had great games like Restaurant City, Farmville, and more. The A4 Tech mouse was versatile. It has one of the best design shapes even to this day. Decent plastic, decent weight, somewhat passable buttons, but overall, you'll never regret getting one. Therefore, even if it breaks on you, guess what? It's dirt cheap, so you just get another one every time that happens. It's as simple as that. And that's one of the few reasons why the A4 Tech mouse is so loved by many and was considered legendary. However, as I got introduced to more games like League of Legends, the trend back then was to have extra buttons on your mouse. Therefore, many brands have innovated on this, but amongst them was Logitech, and the one I bought was the Logitech G300s. This mouse has two side buttons on each side, and it was small. Even the teenager me felt how tiny this mouse was, but at that time, I thought that it was so cool with all its buttons. Therefore, I kept using it for gaming, and that was the only one I could afford as well with my allowance, since other brands like Razer, SteelSeries, and more are just out of my budget. The Logitech G300s worked decently on League of Legends, as there were not that many shortcuts to begin with that a keyboard couldn't handle. So often, what I would map out on my extra mouse buttons were keys I couldn't reach with my small hands, like the number 5 and number 6. But as I played more games aside from League of Legends, my next gaming mouse after that was the Logitech G100s, since I got into FPS games like Counter-Strike. And oh boy, this mouse is hands down one of my most favorite shapes I have ever used up until this day. The only complaint I have with the Logitech G100s is how slippery it can get if you have sweaty hands. But aside from that, you cannot go wrong with this mouse back then. I still wish every day that Logitech would remake this mouse, but sadly I doubt that's going to happen. I really would love this mouse to have better hardware and if possible some side buttons, since I've heard the professional CS2 player Nothing has a custom G100s with an updated hardware, but again, I doubt that that will even be released in the market. As with all mice though, double clicking was always the issue, and back then I didn't have a soldering iron, nor did I even know how to solder my own mouse. Therefore, I had to just replace my mouse every time that happens. So my next replacement was the iconic Logitech G102. It's probably one of the most popular mice back then because of how cheap and safe its design is, whether you have small or big hands. It also has RGB, which was trendy at that time, so this mouse was an all-in-one package. But with a cheap Logitech mouse, it was always a lottery on when your mouse would start having double clicking issues. And sadly mine ended its run after 2 years of usage, which was actually pretty good considering you'll see reviews of the mouse having double clicking issues within just a few months. Another trend during this time was adding holes in the mouse, and I got myself a cheap Fantech mouse with a paracord cable, which was a huge deal back then because the mouse trend was slowly turning into everything getting lighter, hence the additional holes and lighter cables. The Fantech mouse had flimsy plastic, a creaking noise if you squeeze it, and just the overall feeling was not for me. Therefore, for my next mouse, I went big and decided to purchase a more expensive one, and that was the Vaxee NP01S, since I've heard that the creator manufacturers of Vaxee were once employees of the popular brand Zowie, which was known for their great quality mouse. So I ordered one online, which took about a week or so to be shipped out to the Philippines. The Vaxee NP01S was actually almost perfect. No software needed, great feeling plastic, good buttons, somewhat noisy scroll wheel, but overall it was great. After almost a year of using it, my only complaint was that the shape was not for me, and it was also wired, which is sometimes annoying if you play FPS games. And during this time, wireless mice were starting to get cheaper, and so I finally jumped into the wireless team and got myself a Pulsar X Lite V2 Mini. If you compare this to the Vaxee, it was actually a downgrade because of its build quality, but it was wireless, had a decent shape, and was lighter, so I sold my Vaxee mouse. And I'll tell you this, once you go wireless, it's hard to go back to wired. Therefore, even though I really like Vaxee's mouse back then, they still didn't have wireless options, and as of recording this, they actually do sell wireless versions now. However, they still have completely shut down all sales to Southeast Asia, which was saddening. But going back to the Pulsar mouse, it was decent. However, after almost a year of using it, I had to switch to another one. So I tried what was considered to be one of the best mice in the mouse enthusiast community, and that was the Logitech Superlight. I really wanted to enjoy this mouse because of how great its build quality and its overall performance, but it was just too big for my small Asian hands. So after only months of testing it out, I switched again to another Pulsar mouse, the X2H, which has a bump on the back similar to my favorite Logitech G100s. However, again, it was just not for me, and I even tried using grip tapes to save it, but sadly it still didn't feel comfortable. I also tested during this time the Endgame Gear OP1WE, which was honestly good, but again, the build quality wasn't the best, and worse, the mouse click feels so heavy. I just had to sell it. After my annoyance, I finally gave in and bought one of the most expensive mice, and that was the Zowie EC3CW, which is the mouse I'm still using up until today. After almost a year of using it, the Zowie EC3 is one of the most comfortable mice I have ever used, and my only complaint was that the scroll wheel was not the smoothest. If you compare it as well with other mice similar to its price bracket, the Zowie EC3 is a bit underwhelming and it doesn't have the best hardware. And in the gaming mouse community right now, specs are everything, but I'm a firm believer that shape is still the most important thing. But if you remember the title of this video, I am completely done with gaming mouse, and even though I still have my Zowie EC3, I honestly have used it less and less since after getting myself a trackball. You see, gaming mice right now are like an endless search of finding the best shape for you, and it's easy to get lost in this rabbit hole of new mice being released every few months, trying each one out, trying different mouse skates, and don't get me even started about mouse pads because I think that deserves its own video. What I'm trying to say is that it's hard to find the perfect mouse, and I don't ever think that you'll find the one. Because of these realizations that I've decided to test out trackballs, which you can find on this video, but after a month of not using my mouse, it was actually liberating not caring too much if my input device is the best of the best. Yes, there's still some more problems to think about trackballs, like the bearings, the button placement, the size of the ball, and so that's why I chose the safest shape, which was the Kensington Expert with its symmetrical design. Now, the biggest problem with trackballs is how few are being created and being innovated every year. So there's a huge gap in the market if you want many choices. But as I've cared less for specs and more on my enjoyment in the hobby, trackballs were honestly a great refresher for me as I'm getting older and focusing more on productivity rather than gaming. Now I still use my mouse for gaming because that's when it's the most comfortable, but for my everyday use and work, trackballs are now an essential for me. I'm still scratching the surface though of the rabbit hole for trackballs, but it's something I look forward to in the future. That's all for me now, and I'll catch you on the next one.